Welcome to Navigating the Nervous System. My name is Kristen Cronin Boone, licensed therapist, professor, and writer. Do you ever wonder why you do the things you do? The answer might just be your nervous system. Come with me as we explore this incredible system and how it drives your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Let's navigate the nervous system together. Welcome to Navigating the Nervous System. I'm Kristen Cronin Boone, and this is episode 3, Thoughts and Feelings Forever. The first couple episodes, we spoke about the basics, the nervous system states of safe, stress, and shutdown. I highly recommend you go back and listen to episode 1 if you haven't, because it is Nervous System 101. And then last week, we talked about tiny tigers, how to name those threats throughout our life that put us down into that stress and shutdown mode. So today, we are also going to talk a little further about those triggers and threats that we see and how it's really programmed in us with something called predictive coding or predictive wiring. And I will say this is going to be a very simplified version. So you fancy people who are really familiar with this, it's not going to sound very neuroscience-y. This is just a really basic explanation so people can kind of understand how our thoughts and our physical sensations go together. The other thing I want to remind people of is that captain mindset I brought up a couple of times, and we're going to talk about that a little bit further down the episode as to how we can use that when we get to talking about these thoughts and feelings and our awareness of them. So just to keep in mind, that captain mindset is that awareness of our vessel, which is our body, our brain, and our nervous system, and what is in and out of my control. I can't control the water, I can't control the storms, but by being aware, I may be able to navigate and not steer directly into them. And then the last piece of that is not letting other people steer your ship, being the one ultimately that makes the decision about where you're going when it is in your control, of course, as we've discussed. So let's move into this. So the analogy I like to use is that our thoughts or our events, our memories, they are matched up with our physical sensations in our body, which have to do with our nervous system. And it kind of reminds me of the friendship necklaces. If you've ever seen the best friend necklaces that have a heart that's broken into two, and when they're together, they make the full heart, but on their own, they're separate. Because we can have thoughts and events that don't always come with the physical sensation all the time, but a lot of times when it is triggering, those things snap together. And our body's not really great at understanding time. And so if we've had an event in the past that created a stress mode response, and then we run into an event similar to it, our body might be like, oh, I think that thing is happening again, and pull that other part of that best friend necklace together and be like, I got to start freaking out because I remember this. That's predictive wiring. We know that we need to protect ourselves. And so you see this a lot more with negative. It's called a negativity bias because our body is always trying to survive. And so we don't get a ton of like happy triggers like, oh my gosh, I'm getting so happy just because I remembered this thing. Whereas we do get a sudden flood of panic or stress or fear because our body's trying to keep us safe. And that comes back to that survival mindset outpacing our frontal lobe or upstairs brain, our safe state, in order to keep us alive. So predictive wiring is the fact that our nervous system is already set to kind of react in a certain way to certain things. Now, this can be from a lot of different reasons. This could be genetics. It could be because you had a trauma in a certain event. It could be because you were modeled a certain behavior or expectation growing up, or in a church, or in a social situation. It could be just the friend group you have or the job you have. There's a lot of both environmental and internal personality, genetic reasons that we have the physical responses that we do. That's why everybody's not afraid of the same thing, right? And so what we need to start to do using this captain's mindset is, instead of just having these uncomfortable feelings, having the response and trying to like get past them, start to understand, what is that coming from? And, oh, I have this feeling every time this person says something. And then what you can do, because you can't erase the programmed thought and feeling that goes together, but you can kind of upgrade them with new software, like a new version, right? And so what you can do over time is rewire. We are able to have neuroplasticity, which means that we can rewire these events so they're not as triggering. Sometimes they don't completely go away, but overall, we could work on it and be more regulated, which is so much better for our health and our relationships. So let me try to make this a little bit more specific, okay? Let's assume that there's something that really triggers you, like sarcasm. So say you have a friend who is always being sarcastic. Let's make it someone that you're probably not going to need to have a full conversation about it, because we also can set boundaries to help with these triggers. It's not always our job. So let's choose a time where we're not going to necessarily have a full boundary conversation. So let's make it like our partner's cousin. Okay. And you only have to see them every couple months. And so it's probably not worth the boundary conversation, which we would have up in our safe state for this person. If you go back to the tiny tiger episodes of, is this person important enough to be a stressor? And is it a pattern? And whether it's worth your time, that's another good way to decide if it's worth your time to go through all of this rewiring, or if it's just a fluke or just someone you see once a year, maybe it's not such a big deal. But let's say it's someone you can't really have this boundary conversation with for interpersonal dynamic reasons, but you really get triggered every time they come and they have this big sarcastic remark and you leave the room. So what has happened? They say something sarcastic. There is a feeling in your body, whether you're aware of it or not. There is usually a feeling in your body. Maybe it's in your stomach, maybe it's in your chest, maybe it's in your throat. And most of the time it is in your throat, chest, stomach, or something like that, because of something called the vagal nerve, which is kind of what polyvagal theory, our 3 different nervous system states, is about. And that runs throughout our body. And we'll get into the vagal nerve a little bit more later. But basically, that's why you're feeling a physical feeling when that happens. And so one part of the necklace is this person or this sarcasm. Really, it's not even the person, but it's when they're sarcastic. So it's the sarcasm, this situation. And the other part is the feeling you're having in your stomach. And when those go together into that heart, what we call that is an emotion. That's what we call an emotion. The physical response in context of the situation is what we call emotion. So, for example, I'll give you a different example. Say I said something wrong on a phone call at work and now my stomach hurts. I call that guilt. We have the name for that based on the context of the situation and the physical feeling, right? If I hear about a celebrity's death, right, it's not going to completely collapse me, but I hear about a celebrity's death and my throat gets all tight. That might be sadness. And so naming the emotions is really just a physical sensation. And this is where we get stuck, is a lot of times people are very aware of what they're thinking, but not of what they're feeling. And if we only change how we think, we're not going to rewire those triggers, because that physical sensation is stronger and it's going to stick. And so we have to rewire both parts of that best friend necklace. Okay. So let's go back to our sarcasm piece. So you realize, oh, whenever this person is sarcastic, I get this horrible feeling in my stomach and I leave the room. That's probably a flight response. So stress response. And then it upsets my partner because I'm no longer a part of the thing and so ever. And so it's getting in the way, right? And so instead of setting yourself to do that over and over and over again, you can rewire. You can be aware, oh, that's how I feel. Okay. And that's what that feeling in my stomach is. And you can rewire. You can say, this is not worth my time. This is not a tiny tiger. I only have to see this person every couple months. That's a them problem. That's not a me problem. Now, next time it happens, I'm going to remind myself that's a them issue that they feel like they have to be sarcastic or defensive. I am just going to nod and take a breath and follow through with watching that feeling slowly go away, and I'm going to stay in the room. If possible, if you have to still leave after trying this, sometimes it takes a couple tries to not feel overwhelmed by the emotion, by the feeling in your body. That's fine. But slowly you can get to the point where you've rewired yourself to be like, yep, that's that guy. Okay. And move on. And you don't have to leave the room. And because you've told your brain it's not a threat, that situation's not a threat. And this could be anywhere. This could be the way people talk. This could be annoying things they do. It's a lot of things. And we do this with our partners too. Like, we can't, instead of trying to change our partners, a lot of times we could work on just kind of rewiring ourselves. And again, I don't mean the things that are patterns with close people that we want to have deeper conversations and boundary setting with. That is a different thing that once you reset the boundaries, you can go back and do this again. But in some situations, that's out of our control. Strangers, but maybe I still get triggered at the same thing every time I have to pay a bill. I get mad at the person on the phone. Like, I need to work on this is just some poor person probably getting minimum wage. Like, I need to relax and tell myself I can always hang up the phone and try again. Like, yes, the thought might be it's not fair, I'm being taken advantage of, but really at the end of the day, it's just some poor person. It's life that systems are not always set up great, and it's hurting me by having this physical response every single time I have to deal with this. And so I can rewire myself to handle those things better. What I'm hoping to help you understand is that by being aware of not only the situation, but the physical sensation, we can upgrade those feelings to a safe state. And then it'll help with those triggers. And by being aware in the first place, we can program ourselves to not have as many triggers, because we can go, ooh, that bothered me. You know what? Doesn't need to bother me. That's the them problem. I'm just going to take a couple breaths. And guess what? I haven't set up a new trigger because I've emotionally digested and wired the original necklace in a safe state way. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have feelings and physical sensations about it the first time something happens. But if it's not traumatic, it's something you can catch in the middle of that programming and recode and say, this doesn't have to be a big deal. And that's kind of going back to naming those tiny tigers, so you're not creating more of these as you go through life. So we can't necessarily erase the original necklace with trigger issues, but we can upgrade it. And if we move forward doing this, we might not create as many triggers in the first place. So I do want to just make sure I am doubling down on boundaries are important and having conversations are important. But again, even if you're going to have that conversation, it is a conversation to have later when you're in a safe state. So you can still do this work in the moment to get yourself back up to a safe state. And then maybe call that person the next day and be like, hey, you know what? This thing that keeps happening is bothering me. But we'll talk in more depth about interpersonal relationships on another episode. But right now, I'm just wanting you to become captain of your nervous system. And so it's that captain's mindset of being aware, what's a risk to my boat, these triggers, and how can I better prepare for that not to happen all the time. The other thing I like to kind of tell my clients is it's kind of like barrel of monkeys. Like, if you remember, you pull them out and then they pull out more than one monkey. You're working on one monkey, but oftentimes when you are aware and pull one out and go, ooh, how can I fix this? A couple others come with it, because those feelings they're not a million different feelings. There are, but not in the way that our brain does it. So as we get used to, I don't need to let these little things like sarcasm bother me, there might be other places where people are passive aggressive or sarcastic that then don't bother you as much either, because it's kind of applied to other places in your nervous system as well. Now, I will say, when you've had a large traumatic trigger, oftentimes you may need help because the distress is so much that it's not necessarily something you can do on your own just by taking a few breaths into your stomach. And so that is when, if you are in a place where you're just never able to kind of even move an inch on lessening that distress, I would definitely recommend getting someone that can help you do that. So that's it for today. I really want to stay in. This is so much information and I want you to be able to process it. So I want to just reiterate all of this, and then I'm going to give you a very specific way to try to rewire at the end. So just going to reiterate everything we've talked about is continue going through the world, looking at safe, stress, and shutdown, and just becoming more and more aware of it in your life. Tiny tigers. If you remember the big impactful tigers, we do need our energy for in order to solve in a safe state. The big ones like relationships, health, finances, those are tiny tigers. They're not going to kill us immediately, but they are important. And then we have those relational tigers. Remember, we want to try to name, is the person important or is it a pattern? Those are the ones we want to spend our time on. And then the tiger masks, we want to try to rewire, which is what we want to do with this. So if you're getting frustrated every time your deliveries are late, that might be something. And again, we don't know exactly where everything comes from. If you do therapy, you can often uncover, oh, that's from this, or that's from my chemical makeup, or that's from my neurodivergence. And that is something you can do. But ultimately, you can, even without knowing exactly the root cause of why it's triggering you, you can tell yourself, hey, you know what? This is a tiger mask. This isn't that important. I'm going to prepare myself the next time that this delivery is late and take a second and breathe and be like, this is not the end of the world. This is just life. People mess stuff up. Things are late. That's just how it is, you know? And if I really have a pattern of a problem, I can go send an email to whoever it is that's messing this thing up regularly, but I'll do it when I'm calm and not anger type. Okay. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to talk about today is this piece that you can take with you. This is a way to rewire. It's called urge surfing. It's from dialectical behavior therapy. And often when you first read about it, or when I should just say when I first read about it, it is more about riding the thought wave and like trying to get past it, knowing that it will come down. And that's something we all need to wire in our brains over and over and over again, is that these feelings and thoughts, none of them last forever. None of them. We know this. You look back, not even the worst feeling you've ever had in your life did not last forever. Now, it might be pervasive and come up regularly, but it doesn't last forever. And this is how we can start to make those feelings even shorter and shorter. But the idea is that when you have a trigger, you recognize it. And even if it gets a little bit worse, even after you become aware, knowing that's like a wave, it will come back down. And the piece that I think is missing in some of the urge surfing, not all of it, there's some OCD work that often looks at the physical focus of urge surfing. But in my experience, and there may be other DBT people that always use the physical part, and that's fine. But in my experience, we don't focus on the physical part enough. And so my thoughts are to acknowledge the distressing thought. In our example, it was like the sarcastic event. And then recognize the body feeling right away. And then mostly focus on the body, breathing into that place in the body that feels tight, that feels gross, that feels wrong. Because that's really the distressing piece, is how our body feels, and telling ourselves are safe. Again, if we are safe, if there's a reason you're feeling, if you aren't safe, then this is not applying. But in those relational situations where our body thinks we're unsafe, but we really can be okay in a situation, we're just triggered by it. And you focus. So say my stomach hurts, I'm going to acknowledge, yep, that happened. I don't love it, but that's not about me. And then I'm going to focus on that stomach. And I'm going to do either box breathing or just regular breathing, and always end on an exhale. Because if you remember me saying, the exhale really engages our parasympathetic nervous system. And that is the nervous system that tells us we're safe, ultimately. And I'm going to breathe into that. And you'll notice that you can tell that the feeling gets just a little bit of relief, just a little bit relief. And then it as you notice it has relief, that actually has its own power in your brain to be like, oh, if it's getting better, clearly I'm not in more danger. And you just keep going. The other thing you can do, if you have a smart watch or a Fitbit, I believe, has a heart rate monitor. I know not everybody has these things, but if you do, and you can look at the heart rate monitor, if it is something that really triggers you, that actually activates heart rate variability, you can watch your little heartbeat, do the breathing, and you'll see the number come down. And that's like a really helpful thing for some people's brains to see that number actually come down, feels like proof and calms them down. And there might be situations where you're so triggered you can't do all of this upgrading, rewiring work. And there's times that you're not as triggered and you'll be able to just kind of focus on the feeling. And all of that's okay. You just have to decide what is best for you. So try urge surfing, try it with something small. When this is triggering, just notice that in your body and can you breathe through it? You might want to leave the room the first couple times and just work on that before you try to do it in the room. Because obviously it might look odd to people if you're just like, hold on, I'm urge surfing. But you can leave the room or go to the bathroom, wash your hands with that cold water we talked about, and watch that feeling in your body slow down, because that's your body slowly getting back into that safe state. Okay, I hope this was helpful. This is Navigating the Nervous System. Please like, subscribe, follow anything you can. It's very helpful to me. And we have 2 more episodes in this first section. And then I am hoping to bring on guests to talk even more about this and how it applies to all sorts of places in our lives. So thank you for navigating your nervous system with me. I'm Kristen Cronin Boone.